I'm getting a lot of questions about people who maybe are confused because either the system changed from when they got their citizenship and or because they don't know how this works. So I'm going to break it all down for you and explain my thought process and how the Italian government completely destroyed my life. First, when you decide to get your citizenship in Italy, you have to just find your roots, backtrack it to make sure that this person, they had their child, the next kin before they naturalized, if they naturalized at all. Once you do that, you have to order the birth certificates, the documents from the United States government. If your relatives didn't naturalize, they have to search through all of that to make sure, and then they send you a letter saying they didn't naturalize or they did naturalize. I didn't have this scenario because mine did naturalize, but it was okay for my certain scenario. So you order your documents. When you get your documents back, you have to make sure there's no incorrect spellings, there's no mismatched dates. If that happens, you have to file a lawsuit to get those changes in a lot of states. So I had filed a couple of lawsuits, and one of them was like on my marriage license, my name wasn't correct. So I filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania. Once you get that lawsuit done, then you have to go back to where you get your birth certificate, your marriage documents, whatever, and you have it corrected because of that lawsuit. When you get it corrected, you get a new birth certificate, and then once you get that birth certificate, you have to send it to the state to apostolate. And apostolating just means, yep, that's our stamp, and then they send it back to you. All of these things cost a lot of money as you're going through the process, and it's time consuming. You have the government where you have to get when they naturalize, did they naturalize, here's the search, same thing. They send you the documents, you send them back to get it apostilled, and then they send it back to you. Then you have to get those documents translated. Obviously, this whole process is very expensive. Once you have all of your documents, you can file for an appointment at the consulate. Not every consulate has a system where you can be on a waiting list. Miami did not have a waiting list, but that waiting list turned out to not really even matter in the long run anyway. In Miami, you hope to get on your computer at just the right moment when Rome releases maybe 4 seats for an entire region. So the Miami region just didn't cover Florida, it covered Georgia and South Carolina, and so the whole like southern, eastern part of the United States. So I could never get an appointment. But also the consulate is where you would go for your codice fiscale. You need a codice fiscale if you want to pivot to the comune move. And the comune move is you have to commit to living in a comune, and then you apply at that town and you give them your documents there. Now, after you get all of your documents apostilled and back to you, you have to get them translated if you're doing anything over in Italy. So you get your documents translated, you go over there, you find an apartment, which again is something you need for a codice fiscale for. You used to be able to get a codice fiscale in the consulate, but then they started playing games with that also. I will say I did eventually get a codice fiscale from Miami months later when I was already in Italy. So I actually have 2 codice fiscales now because one was done in my passport and one was done with my birth certificate, which have 2 different last names. So I go over to Italy and I make an appointment with this attorney who advertises that you can get your codice fiscale for like $199. And I decided to pay an extra $200 just to have him fine tooth comb all of my documents. So the first available appointment for that was April 9th. I flew in March 8th. The appointment was April 9th. I had a month where I couldn't really do anything because I didn't have a codice fiscale. I had my documents, but it didn't really matter. So then March 27th happened and the decree dropped and everything went to shit, essentially. The only other move after that, because now I couldn't apply at the consulate. I didn't apply at the consulate. I couldn't apply at the comune. Now I had to file a court case, which cost me another $7,000. And I still needed a codice fiscale. But that is how I ended up being in the situation that I was in. The Italian government does this on purpose. It's not like, woe is me, this is like a one-off. This happens to everybody now. It's not unusual. It's a game that they play to prevent having to give citizenship to people. It sounds a little crazy, but there's hundreds of thousands of people who can tell you what I'm saying is the truth. I didn't think it would be a problem to go over and get my citizenship at the comune because I already knew I could get my codice fiscale. I already knew that was not going to be a problem once I got to Italy. There was no place in the United States except for the consulate to get it. So I needed to go to Italy in order to get it. I had my documents, I had already gone through the lawsuits. I had no reason to doubt that my documents were clean. It was a very simple case. It was my grandfather's father, and there was no naturalization issues. There was no name issues. There was no reason in the world to believe that this wouldn't be the natural next step. I would never have spent $10,000 in all of this time to collect these documents if I had known that overnight in 1 second Italy could just say, oops, sorry, we changed our mind. I never would have done that. But I was confident because there was no reason to believe that it couldn't be. That was their process. They created this system. Some people have questioned, well, why did you go to that consulate? That's the reason. Some people have questions, why didn't you get your codice fiscale? That's the answer to that question. Why did you move to Italy and you not have things lined up? I did. It's essentially like you moving to Italy because a job offered you a job, and then you get there and they say, oh, sorry, we changed our mind. It's essentially the same thing, because there was no reason in the world that I had to believe that the law would change overnight. No, it was not even a thought process. And I had a year's worth of savings to live there. I was committed to this. I had all of my ducks were in order. Ducks in a line, ducks in order, you know. So I hope that answers some of the questions on how Italy has destroyed my life.